Hey, what's up everyone? This video is over something that we're not used to seeing. Please feel free to pause at any point. I will be going through some of this stuff kind of fast and there's a lot of information to write down. But we're going to talk about cumulative relative frequency graphs, also known as ogives. And basically we use these to graph percentiles. In a previous video we talked about percentiles. And we know this by the name of it, cumulative. Relative usually stands for percentages, and cumulative stands for adding stuff, and frequency we've seen with histograms, that is going to be the counts that we have. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. And again, feel free to pause at any point if I'm going a little too fast. Your first step to making one of these is to create a frequency table. And it's kind of like what you make for histograms. You want to start off with the bucket column, what your ranges are, frequency, relative frequency, cumulative frequency, and lastly, cumulative relative frequency. So a lot of columns to this, but don't worry, we'll do one of these together. And of course, the bucket is kind of like your range, and the frequency are your count. So this is what you usually make when you're making a histogram. You kind of put a range of numbers, and they put the number in each range. Your relative frequency is the percentages in your counts. Cumulative frequency is adding your count plus all of the previous counts, or the ones below. And the cumulative relative frequency is the percentages of this. I know this doesn't make any sense, but we'll do one together. I'll show you what each of those columns mean. Step 2, you want to go ahead and plot at the smallest bucket value, sorry about that, at the smallest bucket value ahead of the bucket of interest. I know this doesn't make much sense right now, but I'll show you in a bit. This is the step to do it in, but I'll show you right now what all this means. And your last step is to connect the dots, and you want to connect them with a straight line. So let's do an example, because I know this is all a lot to take in. Let's get some random data points. Go ahead and write down all of these right here. I'm going to plot 25 individual grades, and what these grades represent are first 6 weeks math grades of 25 random students. These were actually actual data from a previous class in statistics. They collected themselves, but go ahead and pause to write these down. Got them? Good. Let's jump right into graphing those as a cumulative relative frequency plot. So first you want to create several ranges about the same width, kind of like you did for histograms, because these are buckets that you're putting each point in. Our lowest was 60, and our highest, I'm just going to put the highest grade you can get as a 99. And we're going to make our table. And you want to make sure each of these buckets are equal in size. The next thing was frequency. How many do you have in each bucket? And these were the counts for each of those. We had 3 between those 2, and so on and so forth, as if you're making a histogram. Then we're going to make our relative frequencies, and we have a total of 25. So we're just going to find the percentages for each of these frequencies. 2 divided by 25 is 8%. And you just divide each frequency by your total, and that gives you your percentages. And notice all these percentages should add up to 100. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do the cumulative frequency. We take our first one, and then we add the next. So 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 2 is 10. And we go all the way down. And we're just kind of adding the next ones there. And your last number should be your total number. And then lastly, we have our cumulative relative frequency. And we're just starting off with the first percentage and then adding the next one. So 12 plus 8 is 20. 20 plus 12 is 32. 32 plus 8 is 40, and so on and so forth. Your final percentage should be 100% once you've added them. And that's all you need to make your graph. So let's go ahead and plot our points. We're going to have a little grid. Your left column is going to be your percentages, And your bottom is going to be the buckets, your grades that we had, the ranges for each of them. And don't forget to label each of our axes. And we're going to just go ahead and plot the points. Now, 0% of our scores were below 60. So our first bucket is going to have a point at 0. Then I'm going to go to my next point. From 60 to 64, we had 12%. So that means at 65, the next value, I'll put 12. From 65 to 69, we had 20. So the next value after 69 is 70, so I'll put 20 there. You know how I was saying like the ones beforehand is where you put it? 75 to 79, we had 40, so at 80, we'll put 40. And we're just kind of plotting all of our cumulative relative frequencies at each of these points right here. You're always going to start with 0, and then you put everything on your cumulative relative frequency, and your last value should be 100. 100% of our grades were below 100, so our last one should be 100. Like I said, you just connect the dots with a straight line, kind of like this. So it's going to look like this kind of, it's not going to have a straight line all the way through. It's just a straight line between each dot. And there's your cumulative relative frequencies plot. If I was looking for the 40th percentile, that would be wherever that point is, and that's 80. So this is how you kind of read these right here. If I was looking for the 80th percentile, we don't know that from our data, but we can make an estimate as to where it would be. Your vertical axis is kind of like the percentiles, basically. And based on an estimate, we can estimate our 80th percentile to be between 90 and 95. So probably approximately 92, 93, around there. We can approximate these percentiles. And there you go. That's how we use cumulative relative frequency graphs.